Hi there. Hello?
It is on. Yeah, it's just really low. I had it. Yeah.
Hi there. Thank you. Darren Fraser, are you here? Darren Fraser. Yes? He's here. Great. Go back to chatting. We're not ready yet. Hello. Welcome. Before we get started, may I take a minute first and ask you to silence your phones and devices? Thank you. Please take a moment. We have a full house tonight and we don't want unwanted interruptions for our speaker. Also, may I please ask you to find a seat? Fire code does not allow a standing person in the room. So if you're standing, please find a seat. There are seats all over. Thank you for signaling. Excellent. Okay, good evening. My name is Tony Finitsis, and I'm a professor in the Religion Department and the director of the Wild Hope Center for Vocation here at PLU. On behalf of the Wild Hope Center, I am delighted to welcome all of you to Mr. Rick Steves' presentation entitled Traveling as a Wildly Hopeful Act. Mr. Steves is the nation's leading authority on European travel, and he will share his insights with us this pleasantly atypical Pacific Northwest evening. Yes, sunshine, thank you. My particular welcomes are extended to our speaker, Mr. Steves, his friends and family. I would like to take also a moment and honor the Nisqually, Puyallup, Squaxin Island, and Steilacoom people who are the traditional caretakers of the land on which PLU's campus is located. As we gather tonight, in person and online, I would also like to call to honor the traditional caretakers of these lands wherever you are. I would also like to extend a special thank you to all the people who have worked hard to bring us this event tonight. Particularly, the work of Jillian Chong, the Wild Hope student intern, Kathy Engel and Grace Amsden for their work on the registration form, the Associate Director of the Center, the fabulous Lurie Weiner, and the Center's Director of External Relations, the intrepid Dr. Samuel Torvand. As an event sponsored by the Wild Hope Center, this lecture stems from the Center's commitment to examine calling, foster relationship building, promote human and ecological flourishing, and share these commitments with our PLU family and the wider community. In 2019, Mr. Steves was interviewed by PLU's Resolute magazine, and he said, characteristically, quote, "The whole idea about traveling is to get out of your comfort zone and to gain empathy for the other 96% of humanity," end quote. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Steves.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's nice to be here and share with you some thoughts on the value of travel. I give a lot of different talks around the country, and this is a rare opportunity for me to really think how the road can be church. The road can be the playground, the road can be school, certainly, and the road can be church. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. I've put together a slideshow that normally this would be called Travel as a Political Act. And I've retailored the talk to be Travel as a Spiritual Act, and it's very interesting to do that because you can kind of see, depending on your politics and depending on your faith, how much there is overlapping. It's a fascinating thought, actually. But some people come to this class to hear about my favorite discoveries in France or Italy, or to hear the Travel as a Political Act talk, or who knows what. I won't be able to talk about 90% of what I normally talk about, but I will remind you all of that. Every TV show we've ever made, a whole university worth of travel lectures about every country and all the skills and you name it is available on our website at ricksteves.com. And the Travel as a Political Act book, I thought I would donate 50 of these to PLU for the Wild Hope program, because I'm very excited about the values of what this school is doing to encourage students to find meaningful careers, find their niche, find what God called them to do. And I'm sort of an accidental example of that before I even thought about this concept of wild hope. I thought I can give a little bump to that and also give people a chance to read about the Travel as a Political Act talk. This is a book I just love from all the experience I've had in going places you're not supposed to go and having my perspective broadening on it. So, but the point is, sorry for the ad right off the top, but Samuel will be here and he'll be collecting checks or cash of at least $20 for the book, if you would like it. And we want to raise $1,000 tonight for Wild Hope. So those are there. After I'm done talking, you've got a chance to get that if you'd like, and I'd be happy to autograph it. Okay. When I talk about travel as a spiritual act, I think a lot of people think the conventional pilgrimage. You know, a lot of people want to go to the Holy Land. I mean, there's three different, the great monotheistic faiths share the same piece of real estate, and you can go to the Holy Land and have quite an amazing travel experience, an amazing pilgrim experience. And you can line up with all the tourists to kiss the rock where they believe Jesus was born. Or if you're with a different faith, you can go to other holy spots in the Holy Land. And there's all over the world, there's a lot of candles melting, and there's a lot of people crawling around on their knees. And, you know, there's a lot of interesting ways people work to get close to God. For me, it's an exciting challenge. It's an exciting adventure to get close to God in your travels. And that's something I want to talk about tonight. It's when you think about the great faiths, they're the story of people on the road. I mean, the very first Christians were called the Way. The word for that in Spain is Camino, the Community Santiago, where people would walk all the way to a church, and this is the church here, and they would then finish their pilgrimage. And to this day, countless thousands of people hike for 30 days. It's a long walk from the Pyrenees all the way to Santiago de Compostela, and some of them are Christians, some of them are not, some of them are Buddhists, some of them are just seekers, and other people are trying to lose weight. But everybody is on a journey, and you get there, and it's a fascinating thing to experience, to see these pilgrims. And I love the idea that we can all be pilgrims to a certain degree. If you want to see jubilation, if you want to see people overwhelmed with joy, stand on this square, as I have several times, at about 10 o'clock in the morning, when people walk from the last hostel, and they all arrive in the mid-morning, and their pilgrimage is done. And they're just overwhelmed with jubilation. I don't use that word very often, but here it is jubilation when you've done that pilgrimage. And I never met anybody on that trail that didn't have their life changed because they were on the road. It's a beautiful thing, and sadly to me, a lot of people never take the opportunity to splice a little pilgrimage into their travels. The people, she's standing on a scallop shell, looking up at that cathedral, and she has done her pilgrimage. For centuries, people have walked to St. Peter's in Rome and kissed the worn down toe of St. Peter, you can see right there. What motivates these people? It's a desire to get close to God, I think, and it's not limited to Christianity. The Hajj is a big thing if you're a Muslim. There's 1 billion Muslims on this planet, and one of their tenets is you need to take time once in your life to travel all the way to Mecca. Muhammad, I believe, made that a requirement of people who were capable of doing that, not to go to Mecca as much as to get away from their home. You learn a lot about your home when you leave it. Muhammad said, don't tell me how educated you are, tell me how much you've traveled. I love that quote. It is so pertinent to this day. and I'll talk about that a little while later. So I've been on the road a lot just because I love to travel. I've spent a third of my adult life, I think you could say, 100 days a year, ever since I was a kid, living out of a 9 by 22 by 14-inch carry-on the airplane-sized suitcase, hanging out far away from home, enjoying just nurturing my broader perspective. And if I think back on it, part of the time I'm a tourist, part of the time I'm a traveler, and part of the time I'm a pilgrim. But I'm never alone. That's the very interesting thing. If you're a person of faith, you believe in a God, and you get close to him when you're alone. You get close to him when you're on the top of a mountain. For me, it's one of the great joys of travel. Most of my travel is alone. And I never feel lonely because I'm not alone. It reminds me of where I am in the big mix of things. Now, if you think about a tourist and a traveler and a pilgrim, it's not right or wrong. It's just important to know that all of us have the options to do more than just be a tourist. You know, I work with 100 people up in Edmonds. Our mission is to equip and inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. If we can do that, we've done our duty. I got no problem with Disney World, but if you've been there 3 or 4 times and you don't have a passport, okay, it's time to reach out a little bit. It's time to reach out a little bit, you know. And a lot of people don't know what's out there. Can you imagine a person who loved books and just his or her favorite place was the room that was filled with books, the library. And then after years and years, somebody said, you know, there's an upstairs with just as many books. Or maybe there's more than an upstairs. You wouldn't know if you didn't have the curiosity to leave your home. Leaving your home is a beautiful thing. You learn more about yourself in your home sometimes by leaving it and looking at it from a distance. So a tourist is somebody kind of with a bucket list. They want to see famous places. They want to have a good time. They want to go on a cruise. Nothing wrong with it at all. But it's not going to be transformational in any way other than the size of your waistband, okay? But you want transformational travel. To me, I've been in travel industry for a long time, and people throw in that word, transformational travel. What do you really mean? Well, it is realistic for you to have a transformational experience. You can come home a different person if you can rise above that tourist level, and that means become a traveler. A traveler immerses him or herself in a different culture, intentionally getting themselves out of their comfort zone. It's interesting to me, a lot of people strive to avoid culture shock. It's like culture shock is a dangerous thing. No, culture shock is a constructive thing. It's the growing pains of a broadening perspective. You want culture shock. You need it curated maybe by a good tour guide like me. But culture shock is a good thing, and before I even thought about this so much, I enjoyed getting Americans into some really stressful situations just so they'd be more thankful when they got home. I remember that was my crude understanding. I want these people to be out of their comfort zone, shivering with fear on that bed, so that when they go home, they will be appreciated how privileged and blessed they are. That was before my tour program started to grow, okay? But that's, so the traveler is experiencing something new, and I could talk about that all night. And the pilgrim is becoming something new. The pilgrim is learning about themselves as well as the world. Oh man, if I think about, because all I've ever done in my life is teach what I love. I was a piano teacher until I got into college, and then I ended up being a travel teacher. And I didn't have a big plan, but it's been like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what I've really liked to teach. At first, it was just basic travel skills, how to catch the train, pack light, stay healthy, get a hotel that you can afford, and so on. Europe through the back door. I wrote a book about that, and I give a lot of talks about that. After a while, I said, you can just read the book. I want to go up on Maslow's hierarchy of travel needs. Maslow doesn't know about this, but if you go up a little bit, the next level would be history and art and culture and cuisine, you know, appreciating the fine points of the way different people live. So we can pick and choose what we like and have a broader perspective and come home and have more colors on our palette, you see. It's a nice thing. Okay, so that was that zone. And then since about 9/11, my passion, I've realized, is the very pinnacle of that hierarchy of travel needs. Traveling in a way where you get out of your comfort zone and you get to know the world and you realize that we're 4% and there's 96% out there, and you're able to bring home that most beautiful souvenir, which is a broader perspective. That's the pinnacle. That's, to me, transformational travel. And you can put that into a religious or a Christian sort of lens, and it's getting closer to God. It's a beautiful thing to think about. So my beat is Europe. I just do Europe. My favorite country is India, but I'm a businessman, and I want my work to help as a lot of people, and I see Europe as a springboard for world exploration. So that's what I focus on, because I want to do it really well. So I spend a lot of time over there working on my books, and I'm a good traveler. I am not a good theologian. I dress up like a theologian every chance I get when I'm in Martin Luther country, or this is probably John Knox here in Scotland, but I'm not a theologian. I get asked to come to schools and share thoughts of the road as church, just like anybody in this room could if they traveled and took notes and had that interest on the road. What's my kind of theology in the road as church? Monotheists believe there is one God, and that God, lowercase g, is God, uppercase G, or Allah, or Dios, or whatever language you speak. A lot of Americans get freaked out when you say Allah. I taught my little boy when he was 3 years old at dinner table grace to go Allah, 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 just to freak out my dad, because my dad was, so he goes Allah, 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 and he did that. And but Allah is just Arabic for God, like Dios, I think, is Spanish, and so on. So Allah is not the boogeyman, okay? When the Muslims say there is one God and he is God, Allah, you know, that's the call to prayer, right? There's one God and he is Allah. Well, that's one God, lowercase g, because a lot of people have a lot of gods, and he is the God. Okay, so that's kind of monotheism. If you believe there's one God, it's just logical. It follows that we are all children of God. He created us. He's our heavenly Father, Mother, Creator. Put it in whatever, you know, cultural perspective terms you want. It's kind of funny to me to debate that. Of course, he's not a man, but that's what he's been called for eons. But there's a creator, and we are all his children. That means we're all brothers and sisters. And that means when you travel, you're getting to know the family. My relatives think I don't take my family as seriously as I should. And I think that's in part because I've got a much broader family. And I treasure that awareness that we are all equally precious, beloved children of God. And from a heavenly point of view, we're all brothers and sisters. Suffering across the street is no more real than suffering across the sea, period. Suffering of my sister is no more real than suffering of your sister. Of course, there's emotional realities and so on, but you can challenge yourself to see it with this broad perspective that I think a student of the road is more likely to nurture and have. So when we travel, we get to know the family. And then Christians are distinguished among those monotheists because we believe that Jesus came to bring us grace and salvation by showing us the way. Our lives are a journey, a way, a camino. And it's a wonderful thing just to think about. I love the notion that Jesus was not white and he didn't speak English, much to many people's concern. And I just love to see other societies as ethnocentric as we are. Ethnocentrism is not a conviction that you're a bad person. It's natural to be ethnocentric. And the biggest societies are more ethnocentric than the smaller societies. Who are the ugly ones? You know, you hear about ugly Americans? Well, there's also ugly Indians, ugly Chinese, ugly Russians, ugly Germans. Those are the ugly ones. What do they have in common? They think they're the center of it all, you see? Therefore, you are more likely to be ethnocentric in those countries. You don't have as many ugly Danes. Well, you do have ugly Danes. You don't have as many ugly Norwegians. You don't have ugly Bulgarians. You don't have ugly, small countries, because they know they're not the norm. So this is a fun thing to I think, have fun with. Have fun with. And notice how wherever you travel, that country is in the center of the map, you see. And wherever you travel, Jesus looks like that country. And it's human nature. And we can work on that. As a pilgrim, you need to be open to that idea. As a pilgrim, you need to be packing light. I've always been fanatic about packing light. For me, there's two kinds of travelers, those who pack light and those who wish they pack light. I mean, think about it. You'll never meet anybody who after 5 trips brags, every year I pack heavier. With experience, you get serious about packing light. If you're a pilgrim, you have to pack light. You got to be nimble. You've got to be unencumbered. I have almost an moral crusade in my work to travel with people who are packing light, because it frees them to be more raw and open to the experience and flexible and less materialistic and American when they're far away. We take 30,000 people on our bus tours every year on 1,000 different tours. Nobody is allowed to check any bags. It's just a way we shape the clientele, all right? 9 by 22 by 14 inch, carrying the airplane thing, that's all you get. For a lot of people, that's like, what? That was my cosmetics kit. That's all you get. And people are glad. It's a kind of freedom to be going. I always say, if I had Sherpas, I'd set them free. I don't need more stuff. I don't want more stuff. It's sort of an enlightenment to be able to pack light on the road. These people are packing light. That's all you need. Winter, summer, rich, poor, man, woman, 2 weeks, 2 months. I don't care. There's no excuse. You got to be packing light. You also got to know how to find good accommodations. Actually, that used to be good accommodations for me. I sort of lament my inability to travel like I did when I was a kid. I remember I thought this was just incredible. $10 for a bed, and you get a kitten tossed in for no extra. That's a place to write home about. The irony is, as we get more safe and risk averse and creature comforts and have more money, we buy ourselves out of the real pithy experience of travel. But that doesn't mean we have to slam the door on it. We can have our refuge where we get a good night's sleep and a safe place to leave our gear and still get out there and get our fingers dirty in what we traveled so far to see and experience. I like to feel small. Traveling does a lot to make me feel small. And for me to feel small is a way I can get close to the awesomeness of God's creation. It's a beautiful thing. It's something I work on. And you can see how good I am at it here. This is in Paris. It's easy to feel small on the street art in Paris that has a sense of humor. Oh, baby. You can talk about great eating. If you're at 8,000 feet after hiking for 4 hours all morning, and you've got a little sandwich you tucked away from breakfast, a carrot and half an apple, and you took the luxury of a little tablecloth with you, that is a beautiful meal. You're feeling good. You're on a ridge high in the Alps, surrounded by God's great creation. You're hungry, you're healthy, and you're eating simple. Oh, there's something about, I don't know why, that's part of being on a pilgrimage. And also, when you're on a pilgrimage, you've got to have your window down. You can't shy away from the grubby hands of the beggars and the people who will never see their names on a plane ticket. It's so easy to shield ourselves from that. But we have to travel in a way where we are exposing ourselves to. This was me when I was a kid. But still, those experiences were priming me. It was kind of like tenderizing a steak or something. They were coming into me and just making me ready for a more transformational experience when it comes to this notion that we're all equally precious and deserving children of God. These are called bodies without souls. And many times in your travels, you're reminded about our mortality. And it's a beautiful thing. Around here, in our own choice of life, we can shield ourselves from reminders of mortality. And I think, of course, these are the Capuchin monks in many places around Europe. These monks have an interesting tradition of hanging their dead brothers up to dry down in the crypt or in the cellar, and then they decorate with the bones, and then 100 years later they charge tourists to see them. But there's usually a banner up above before you go into the bone house, and it says, "What you are is what we were. What we are is what you will become." Just a fun little reminder halfway through your vacation. But I do like those reminders that our time on earth is fleeting, and it's great to get out and get to know God's creation. It takes a little work. It takes a little work, and it humbles us as we Band-Aid up those blisters. But we really get out there, and we have a romantic approach to nature. This is just a classic 19th century romantic. And, nature was almost a religion in the Romantic age. And people would go and commune with nature. There was the big cultural big shots were not in the palaces of Paris, but they were walking in the woods. There was a time when part of every academic day at Oxford or Cambridge was to take a walk in the woods and commune with nature. We can manage to live our lives with almost no communion with nature. And I think when we do travel, we get that chance to commune with nature. And you can do it on the road. I find it's easier for me to do it on the road than at home, just because I'm tuned into this intense, amped up experience as somebody who's got the road as church. But I took this hike when I was in my 20s. And ever since then, I've given lectures. I've had this image. I love to say it when I'm giving a talk about the Alps. Imagine you're on a ridge, tight roping on a ridge, high above the valleys in Switzerland's Alps. On one side, you got lakes stretching all the way to Germany. On the other side, you got the most incredible alpine panorama anywhere, the Eiger, Monk, and Jungfrau cut-glass peaks. And ahead of you, you hear the long legato tones of an Alp horn, announcing that the helicopter-stocked mountain hut is open, it's just around the corner, and the coffee schnapps is on. Is that a beautiful moment? Oh, I went back after 40 years with my girlfriend Shelley, and we hiked on that same ridge. And I'll tell you, if anything can make a Lutheran go like this, it's being on a ridge so close to heaven. People ask me, what's your favorite cathedral or church in Europe? And a lot of times I say, a ridge on top of the Alps. There is a place you feel close to God. It's interesting, in your travels, you've got these thin places. You've heard of that concept before? Places that just, whatever your religion is, there's a thin buffer between here and what's going on up there. And, of course, Assisi is a thin place, the home of St. Francis. Thin to the degree that people of all different faiths, interfaith, not ecumenical, but interfaith organizations choose to meet here because everybody is feeling close to God, And you go there and you hear the same bird sound that inspired St. Francis so long ago. And it's just a wonder. You got to take a moment to be there. The typical tourist is just on a dash to see all these things. You've got to hike up to the ruined castle, have a picnic, and listen to the birds. If you're in a thin place, be a pilgrim. That's why you're there. If you're a druid, you'll want to go to Stonehenge or Avebury on the summer solstice. That's a thin place for them. If you like medieval church architecture or modern church architecture, I find great churches in Europe are beautiful places to take a moment. This is the Church of the Sagrada Familia, the Holy Family by Antoni Gaudí in Barcelona. It's an Art Nouveau church. This is Iona, where Christianity came to Scotland. And there's something in the air in Iona. I don't know what it is, but Iona just makes you close to God. I became fanatic about the Jubilee year, using the whole Bible idea of forgiving the debts and redividing the wealth in the land. I mean, in the Bible it says every 50 years or something, you forgive all the debts and you redivide the land. Rich Christians know God must have been kidding. I mean, you can't be serious about that. But it is an interesting notion, and on Iona, I was so inspired by that. I learned about it there, and I dedicated a lot of energy with Bread for the World to help, and we managed to do that, which really set many countries free from the bondage of indebtedness of poor nations to rich nations in the 21st century. People is what carbonates your travel experience, especially if you're seeing the road as church. If somebody tells me they saw all the sights, well, that's good for you, but if somebody tells me they made a lot of friends, they're really having a richer travel experience in a lot of ways. That's, to me, what distinguishes a good traveler, is how many real people are you going to meet. Not how many people are camped outside of the hotel and ready to sell you a postcard. How many people do you have a drink with and share and get to know each other? It's an option. We are very interesting people, and when we're on the road, we are very approachable if we let ourselves be approachable. And I've been harping on this for decades in my teaching. Ever since I was a kid, I've said, you see 4 cute guys sitting on a bench, ask them to scoot over. You need to join them. You need to be an extrovert. This is how you amp up the experience. And I've been saying that for decades, and it works. You can join the old guys on the bench. You can get to know people who have a life story that I don't have. This would be a worker with the whole hammer and sickle thing going on in a communist country. That was a beautiful experience to get to know and befriend somebody who had that life story. Here's a taxi driver who explains to me his politics in Ethiopia. Here are people with a very striking sense of fashion in Guatemala. And you learn that we have a lot in common. I mean, we play checkers with people in El Salvador. People lick their ice cream cones with the same vigor all over this planet. And I just love that when I look at a shot like this. When I look at this little girl, I think she could be a little girl tired of the adult conversation in the next room, taking a little nap on the overstuffed chair in so many places. She could be in Canada, Australia, India, Colombia, Mexico, Iran. She happens to be in Iran. But she looks just like a kid next door to us, you know. And I just, time and time again, I see that oneness that there is. And it makes it more difficult for our society to make me want to build walls instead of bridges, you see. It's just a subversive thing to get to know your enemies. And it's my kind of subversion. It's my kind of bad trouble. When I am traveling, I love to celebrate the thought that everybody has their own dreams. We have the American dream. These people have the Sri Lankan dream. My Norwegian relatives have the Norwegian dream. My friends in Mexico have the Mexican dream. It's a different dream. Every dream is different, and that should be celebrated, not taken as a threat. What? You've got a different dream? Of course they've got a different dream. And when we travel, we gain an appreciation of that. When we travel, we also realize we are not the norm. I'm doing my diversity check right now. This is it's actually a much more diverse crowd than I normally talk to, believe it or not, but it's still pathetically not diverse. But I don't think that's horrible, frankly. It's normal that people hang out with their tribe, but it's not right for us not to relish the opportunity to get out of our tribe. You know, my parents are Norwegians. My grandparents came over on the boat. I'm a Lutheran. I married a girl whose parents came from Ireland, and guess what religion they are? To this day, every ethnicity has that. They like to celebrate the way they like to celebrate. It's just important for us as human beings, recognizing that we're all equally precious children of God, to celebrate the diversity on the planet and get out there and revel in it. Put yourself in a situation where you're the one who's stared at, where you're the oddball, and learn that we are not the norm. The fact that this room is not very diverse is not the issue. I think the issue is, do we think we're the norm? And Americans are pretty good at thinking they are exceptional. The only thing exceptional I think about Americans is our ability to think that we are exceptional. It blows me away to think that an educated person could think that in God's eyes they are exceptional. In some TV broadcaster's eyes, you're exceptional. Well, of course, that's just a whole different story. But really exceptional? No, So when we get an opportunity, get out of our comfort zone. I'll never forget being in Afghanistan, just backpacking through. I sat down at the cafeteria where all the backpackers sit, and a man joined me. He said, "Can I join you?" I said, "You already have." And he said, "Are you an American?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm a professor here in Afghanistan, and I want you to know that a third of the people on this planet eat with spoons and forks like you do, and a third of the people eat with chopsticks, and a third of the people eat with their fingers like I do, and we're all civilized just the same." This happened a long time ago, and I remember those words. We're all civilized just the same. This dear Afghani professor spent his lunch hours, apparently every day, sitting with a tourist, asking that same question and saying, we're all civilized just the same. He had a chip on his shoulder because I thought less of him because he ate with his fingers. And I thought about that, and I realized he was right. I really thought he was less civilized because he didn't put a dirty metal utensil in his mouth when he was doing something as beautiful as eating. Because in his culture, God gave you these beautiful fingers to nourish yourself. It's a beautiful, holistic thing. It's not right or wrong, but how could that be less civilized, And that was my ethnocentricity. And I spent the rest of that trip through South Asia eating with my fingers, going to good restaurants filled not with tourists, but with professional locals, well-dressed locals, stepped into that restaurant, not a spoon or fork to be seen. I'm sure they had one in a drawer somewhere if you asked for it, but they had a ceremonial sink in the middle of the room. People would wash their hands and use these fingers for what they were meant to do. To me, that is really eye-opening. It's one of the beautiful fruits of being open to the reality that we are not the norm. People that need to sit on something when they go to the bathroom are not the norm. We're the oddballs. I know that because I was on an airplane in India once, and it had a little decal on top of the toilet room there in the head on the plane, instructing people not to stand on the rim and squat over it, because for the people in India, the norm is not to sit on something. So that's beautiful stuff, to get exposed to that and to enjoy the culture shock that comes with that. I've been working on, as a tour guide and a travel teacher, I've been working on this concept of ethnocentrism, which I've already been talking about, and thing I just coined the name chronocentric. We see things through our generation's eyes, and we judge it through our generation's eyes, and we judge it through our culture's norms. And as a traveler, as a pilgrim, when we get far away from home, we've got to get away from our ethnocentrism, and when we're sightseeing, I think get away from our chronocentrism. If you go to St. Peter's Basilica, this is the most holy place on earth for 1 billion Roman Catholic Christians. You step inside. For many years, I stepped inside that great basilica and was just angered. I was pissed off. I was a Protestant. Why did they spend all that money? What could they have done with that money? And how are they going to earn their way to heaven by gilding the rooftop? And then I decided, I'm going to park my Lutheran soror at the door, and I'm going to come in as a temporary Roman Catholic. And I had a whole different experience. It was a beautiful experience. And ever since then, my visits to St. Peter's Basilica have been wonderful. Park your ethnocentric sword at the door. If it's a mosque, if it's a synagogue, if it's something that you don't understand or agree with, check it out. You know, it's not dangerous. It's just an opportunity to broaden your perspective. Know what we're looking at. Understand that 500 years ago, people were just, religion permeated their society, and this was their attempt to, I think, get close to God and to glorify God. And when you go in there, in my teaching, I'm always reminding people, the more understanding you bring to your sightseeing, the more you'll get out of it. I can't save you money on the admission to the museum, but I can help you enjoy the museum twice as much if you just know what you're looking at. And that's a budget trick, actually. But when you go to St. Peter's, I mean, you see a guy with a bushy beard and a key, well, you better know who that is. He's the guy buried under that main altar. And if you look above that altar, that dome, built 500 years ago, designed by Michelangelo, has 6-foot-tall, gilded mosaic letters that say in Latin, Tu es Petrus, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. Understand the importance of that without judging it. I don't understand the value of judging. Of course we've grown beyond stuff. Of course they've had Vatican II and we've had the Reformation, and we know that this is that and this is that. But try to see it in the context of the day. What was the big deal about a printing press? Before which time, the time when every book was handwritten. Only very wealthy people could afford a book if it's handwritten. Now you can spread those ideas. What was the big deal about translating the Bible into a language you can all read? That was a big deal. And it coincided with the advent of the printing press. And it turned Europe into a cauldron of war. A lot of historians call it the First World War. Almost every country in Europe was involved. A third of Germany was dead after 100 years of religious fighting as they tried to sort out this very stressful thing. Now we can read the Word of God in our own language, and you can print up information and spread it around so anybody can, I guess one of the things is now every 2-bit pastor can carve their own pathway to hell, you know. There was that kind of notion instead of everybody in lockstep reading the same Latin scripture, you see. So it was a chaotic time, but understand why, in the case of Luther, that was such a big deal 500 years ago, rather than always seeing it by, oh, big deal, our eyes. This shot reminds me of how exciting it is to go to a culture far away and realize that everybody has challenges. We have our challenges, other people have their own challenges. I was motoring around Turkey, Eastern Turkey, with a tour group once. I was the guide, but I had a Turkish guide with me to help translate and all that. And there's not much in the way of bucket list sites in Eastern Turkey, just in the shadow of Mount Ararat, that's about it. But it is full of little treasures if you know where to look. And that's what we were doing on this tour. And we're just looking for stuff to see, and we found a little high school stadium filled with kids having a pep rally. Park the bus, go in. 100 Turkish high school kids having a pep rally, singing together as they thrust their fist up in the air. We are a secular nation. We are a secular nation. Asked my guide, what's going on? Don't they like God here? And she says, oh, no, we love God. But considering the rising tide of Islamic fundamentalism just over the border to the east in Iran, we're very concerned about the fragile and precious separation of mosque and state. So we're having a pep rally here for pluralism. What a amazing, wonderful thing for this American, ethnocentric, thinking we know what the issues are, to realize, wow, a bunch of teenagers having a pep rally for pluralism in the shadow of Mount Ararat. Beautiful, beautiful moment. You have all of these moments. A lot of Americans will never have these moments because they're too afraid. The irony is, I think some famous American said, the only thing we have to fear about is fear itself or something. And if you think about it, fear, when it's used to manipulate us, makes us more endangered. And I've been teaching travel for 40 years, and I've never seen our populace so afraid of traveling. I remember when people said bon voyage. Remember those days? Bon voyage. When was the last time anybody told you bon voyage? Wouldn't that be refreshing? Bon voyage, have a great trip. What do they say now? Have a safe trip. We'll pray for you. You sure you should be going over there, considering all that's happening? When somebody tells me have a safe trip, I'm inclined to say, well, you have a safe stay at home. Because if you knew the statistics, and I know statistics are optional these days in our country, but if you knew the statistics, and you cared about your kids, you would take them to Europe tomorrow. We live in a dangerous place. This is how I sell tours. Have a safe trip. I can honestly say it is statistically, it's never been safer to travel than right now. And I know PLU is really committed to foreign study and so on, and it must break your professors and administrators' hearts when something happens and all the parents freak out and you got to cancel that trip. And you know, right now our world just became a little more dangerous place because these beautiful young future leaders didn't get that chance to study abroad because something happened in a city of 20 million people, Istanbul. There was a bomb, and now you cancel everything that's going east of Paris. It's crazy. Fear is for people who don't get out very much. The flip side of fear is understanding, and we gain understanding when we travel. Who are the most frightened people in our society? Think about it. They're the people with no passports, buried deep in the middle of this great nation of ours, whose worldview is shaped not by travel, but by commercial news media, which is charming to think that it's news, but it's just entertainment masquerading as news, and when they don't make enough money on their ads, they got to amp it up and make it more scary, and now they're in the profit again, and all of their viewing audience is more scared than ever. And what happens? We have to build walls. We have policies and leaders who are preying on that fear, and we become more endangered. What we need to do through our travels, through our foreign study programs, through our education, higher education especially, is teach a younger generation to have a mindset more enthusiastic about building bridges and less enthusiastic about building walls. That would make us safer. And that's the result of thoughtful travel. We get that when we get out to get away from our comfort zone, when we get to know the enemy. I have an interesting personality trait. If my government says I cannot go somewhere, that's the first place I want to go. You know, a lot of Americans that way. They're just salivating over a trip to Cuba. I've never met an American that didn't have a great trip in Cuba. It's one of the most amazing places to go. It's the #1 resort destination for Germans and Canadians in the Caribbean. It's one of the best-selling Lonely Planet guidebooks, and most Americans don't think you can go to Cuba. Of course you can go to Cuba. You're just going to meet people that don't have the same economic religion that we do. And our government thinks that's dangerous. I think you're contributing to peace when you go to a place like Iran or Palestine or Cuba, and people there get to know us, because then it makes it tougher for their propaganda to demonize us, and when we come home it makes it tougher for our propaganda to demonize them, and the peace that travel can create is a little more able to take hold. I just love the experiences I've had. If I was talking about this Travel as a Political Act book, it's just chapters on my most valuable travel experiences on the road. And every time I go to a place like Cuba or Iran or Russia or Palestine, you can imagine the value of the experience you get there. I went to Iran to film. This was during the Iraq War, and I was worried we were going to bomb Iran. And people asked me, why are you going to Iran? And my early answer was, well, I think it's just good style to know people before you bomb them. It's a reason, you know, the government tries to dehumanize the gooks so we can kill them and nobody will cry at home, you know. And we've killed a lot of Muslim people because of 9/11, and it's just, we don't even think twice about it. You know, if a little girl falls down a well, everybody, you know, goes to the rescue. But if something else happens, we dehumanize our enemies. I wanted to go to Iran and humanize 70 million Iranians and find out why they voted for a guy like Ahmadinejad back when our perception of Iran was shaped by Ted Koppel and the hostage crisis. I mean, there's a lot of smart people in this room who know very little more about Iran than what they learned from Ted Koppel, truth be told. That was me. And I was embarrassed about it. I thought, I got a gig with public television. I could take my crew over there. I could do a 1-hour special on Iran, and I don't need advertisers, so I can get away with it. I'm in public television. Nobody would never see the light of day on commercial television. So we went over there with our camera, and I was afraid. I almost left my big camera in Athens and took our little sneak camera in. Thank goodness we had the nerve to take our big camera into Iran. I've never worked in a country where we were so warmly received on the streets as when we were in Iran. Now, I mean, there's very hateful propaganda all over the place. I mean, 8-story tall graffiti posters that say, "Down with the USA," the stripes made of falling bombs and the stars made of skulls. Walking underneath that as an American, awkward. Really awkward. Now, a lot of Americans just clench their fist and fly the flag and be pissed off. But I thought, wait a minute. That graffiti is older than any of the people on the street. And they live in a theocracy where nobody can question things and it stays up there. And you're in a city of 10 million people with lots of traffic jams. I was down in that traffic jam later on this day. It was silent. We're stopped in the traffic. The man in the next car asked my driver to roll down the window. I'll never forget, he handed over a bouquet of flowers and he said, "Give this to the foreigner in your back seat and apologize for our traffic." Now, I don't know about Tacoma, but that never happens in Seattle. Never happens. These are the little kernels you learn when you're on the road that you would never learn at home. Another one, I was in another traffic jam on that same trip, and it was just quiet. And suddenly our driver, he just blurted out, he said, "Death to traffic." And I said, "No, wait a minute. I thought it was death to Israel or death to America." And he goes, "Well, no, right now it's death to traffic." So I said, "What is it with you Iranians about death to everything?" And this is my driver. He's not a highly educated guy. He's just a hard-working driver who speaks a very broken English. And he was my friend, and we were communicating the best he could. And he said, "Well, in Iran, when something is frustrating to us and out of our control, we say death to that." Now, what is he translating? Damn. That's what damn is. Death to that. Damn you. Damn the traffic. Damn the weather. And I thought, I wish we had a little more nuanced understanding of all this death to stuff, you know? I thought, have I ever thought like, damn those teenagers? Well, yes, to be honest, I have thought that. Now, do I really want them to die and burn in hell for an eternity like I just said? No, just turn down the music. It's after midnight, you know? Death to teenagers. Damn those teenagers. So we learn stuff that complicates our life when we travel. Thomas Jefferson said travel makes a person wiser if less happy. I find that very thought-provoking. And do you want to be happy? Do you just want to go to your grave with a barbecue apron and nice people that look just like you at your funeral, you know? It's not what I want to do. There's an organization here, you got Hope, Wild Hope, right? Wild Hope doesn't want to just have the same people drinking the same beer with the same barbecue with the same barbecue and friends. We want to reach out and get to know the world. And you do that when you take the initiative. And there's countries like Iran that have their own baggage, just like we've got baggage. And, oh boy, I'm so thankful for these experiences. And as I mentioned, every TV show I've ever made is available for free anytime you like at my website at ricksteves.com. So if you're curious about that, it's just a click away, and it's an hour show on Iran. Sadly, it's as poignant today and appropriate today as it was when we made it. Our Holy Land show, our fascism show, our Martin Luther on the 500th anniversary of the Reformation show, our Hunger and Hope, Lessons Learned in Ethiopia and Guatemala. All of these shows are available with all my other light travel stuff on my website if you want to check it out. But I mentioned baggage. And one thing I've been very thoughtful about is the baggage that we all have because of 9/11. Remember when we were younger, we had Depression-era baggage, World War II baggage. You know, my dad used to import pianos, and a lot of people wouldn't buy a piano from him because it was made in Germany. You know, back in the 1960s, people they weren't comfortable with that because of the war. That's baggage. Vietnam baggage, Red Scare baggage. Now we have 9/11 baggage. 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, we lost 3,000 people on a horrible event. We're a country of 300 million people, a mighty nation, and it changed us. And we did things we're not proud of, but we did it because we got hit and we were hurt and we had to, and okay, that's our baggage. And we expect other people to give us a little understanding, a little wiggle room. Well, we should give other countries a little wiggle room for their baggage too, but it never occurs to us. People cut us some slack because I don't even want to talk about the terrible things we did. It's heartbreaking how the world suffered after 9/11. And we just got to remember every country has baggage. I think it's pretty rare for a country that doesn't have baggage as tough as 9/11 in living memory. And this is something we can remember. Iran, it's got Iran-Iraq war baggage in the 1980s, over 1 million casualties. They were invaded by Saddam Hussein in Iraq, funded by the United States of America. And they had the carnage on their Western Front that you see when you watch All Quiet on the Western Front. I mean, it was hellish. And that's baggage. And when we talk about regime change, to them, that means the Shah again. That means a whole different society. And they know what incursions are in the West because of their baggage. This woman has gone to this cemetery in every town, every Tacoma, Everett, Mukilteo, Bellingham. Every town has a martyrs cemetery that's as alive with grief today as it was in 1988 when those people died. And every Friday since then, this woman has come to this graveyard, sat cross-legged on the tomb of her husband or son or father, wept, and maybe cursed. It's baggage. We've got to understand that there's serious baggage. On my last day in Iran, I was working on the street. A well-dressed professional woman came up to me and she said, "Are you an American journalist?" I said, "Yes." And she did this with her finger on my chest. "I want you to go home and tell the truth. We're strong, we're united, and we just don't want our little girls to be raised like Britney Spears." That's exactly what she said. I mean, you could swap out Britney Spears for somebody who's in the news right now. But what was she so afraid of? That an incursion from the West would throw away her religious leader, put in the Shah, and when the Shah was on the throne, they were bragging the miniskirts are shorter in Tehran than they were in Paris. And her little girl her morality would be kidnapped. She'd become a boy toy, a crass materialist, and a drug addict. That's what this woman was afraid of, not oil politics or anything like that. Who voted for Ahmadinejad? How did 51% of Iran vote for what seems like a nutcase like Ahmadinejad? Well, I thought that was inconceivable until 6 years ago. Forgive me, I'm venturing out of travel as a spiritual actor. But who voted for Ahmadinejad? What was his base? It wasn't the sophisticates in the big city. It wasn't the equivalent of people on the coast. It was the small town, rural, less educated fundamentalists in that country. Small town, less educated fundamentalists. Good people, don't get me wrong. Good people, driven by love and riddled by fear, because they had a narrow worldview and they were victimized by people who used fear against you. That created the base that gave Iran what they've got today. And when I met that woman, it occurred to me there's hope. If we travel, if we connect, we can be less fearful. And we don't need to be enemies. It was a beautiful moment. to have that realization. And these beautiful girls today are the women on the streets in Iran fighting to be able to take those scarves off their heads. Look at those faces. Oh, so many Americans in the old days anyways would look at that and go, it's horrible. I look at that and I go, it's beautiful. Look at those beautiful spirited faces, ready to be free, ready to win their civil liberties and so on. And if we all traveled, it could more likely happen. There's a lot of walls on this planet, metaphorical and physical. We cannot pretend to understand a wall until we've gone to both sides of that wall and talked to people. You cannot have a professor teaching you a single narrative approach to a wall. It's got to be dual narrative. As a tour guide, one of the things that really frustrates me is Christian groups go into Israel for the Holy Land, and they make a little beeline into Bethlehem, which happens to be an enemy territory in Palestine. They see the Church of the Nativity, and then they come back and take a breath of fresh air or sigh of relief that they made it back to Israel. This is the standard American tourism for Christian groups in the Holy Land, and it's a lost opportunity. You need a dual narrative approach, and you need a clientele or tour members or travel partners that are a little more sophisticated in their understanding of what's going on in the Middle East than to find a Palestinian person and say, isn't that lovely, you're a Christian. How long has your family been Christian? About 2,000 years. I mean, they've been Christian from the start, and they're in the West Bank. And we can go there and we can understand the reality of Christians, Muslims, and Jews trying to figure it out. I just love the opportunity of going to the Holy Land and trying to sort through it. You go to Bethlehem and you've got a commotion of stars and of crosses and crescents on the holy buildings in Bethlehem. Not a yarmulke in sight because they're on the other side of the wall. These walls, they create unintended problems. The Israelis, understandably, I think, built that wall to protect themselves from the danger of Palestinian terrorists. I can understand why they built that wall. But the unintended consequence of that wall is it keeps the younger generation from talking to each other. Consequently, both younger generations, Muslims and Jews, are saddled with their parents' baggage. And if they could just talk to each other, there could be some progress. That's what frustrates me about that wall so much. And when I get to travel there as a tourist, I can go to both sides of the wall. I can hang out with Jewish kids in a settlement, and I can hang out with Muslim kids in a refugee camp. And I can make friends on both sides. I can understand but my guides can't. My Muslim guide could not go to Israel, and my Israeli guide could not go to Palestine. I could go back and forth easily. When you go to the Holy Land, you see the tomb of Abraham, 4,000 years old. It's in a medieval building with bulletproof glass on the tomb, separating a mosque and a synagogue, because that's the common patriarch, Abraham. And Muslims and Jews are there worshiping at the same tomb with bulletproof glass. Talk about poignant. And we can go there in the West Bank and learn about that. We can have wonderful Jewish friends and wonderful Muslim friends, and we can get them together. I'm so thankful for the experience I had in the Holy Land, and I know a lot of people are now into this dual narrative approach. But if you're making a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, it's very important to get both sides, because there's a lot of exciting things going on the other side of that wall as they sort through the land issues. Before I wrap things up, I do want to talk just about the political dimension of being an American traveling in the developing world and reckoning with the power of our economy and our policies, our trade, our military, and the impact that has on desperately poor people. We need to know that half of our planet earns $5 a day or less, and that 10% of humanity is in extreme poverty, earning $2 or less per day. We need to know that hunger was on a trajectory to be beaten in our generation. It was cut in half in our generation, and I think the long-term trajectory is good, but in the last decade it has ticked up because of climate change, conflict, corruption, and COVID. It's a great fight to beat hunger. And we need to know we're a stakeholder in it. And we also need to know there's blood on our banana. You know, there's a consequence for our power. And I went down there. That's what politicized me when I was a kid. I went down to El Salvador and Nicaragua, and I was so inspired by what I learned. I wrote a 32-page journal, and the title was There's Blood on Your Banana, and I physically delivered it to every representative in Washington, D.C.'s office. I'm sure very few read it, but I had to make this point because I wish people could go down there and meet the people that are struggling south of our border and to humanize that. I'll never forget, a little while ago, my family and I were going to go to Mazatlan, and I needed a vacation. I was fantasizing about a pristine stretch of tropical beach, swept free of local riffraff, just me and my white friends with plastic straps on our wrists, making it we could get all the margaritas we wanted without dirtying our fingers in the local currency. You know what I mean? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. That is the American vacation. We don't stand on a stage and proclaim it, but that's what we do. When we go down there, we can have that, or we can have a more of a reality experience. It's a choice, Managua or Mazatlan. Well, I was going down there because I needed a break. I wanted to be with my family on that beach. And then my friend said, it's the 25th anniversary of the assassination of Archbishop Oscar Romero. And if you want some inspiration, learn about this man, Oscar Romero. 25th anniversary of his assassination. I said to my family, I'm going to be no fun on the beach. So I had to cancel the family vacation and went down there and marched with all these El Salvadorans on the anniversary of his death, and to be learning about the word solidarity with downtrodden people as a traveler is a powerful thing. I love the idea of solidarity because that's how the only way powerless people, voiceless people can raise their voices, with solidarity with each other. And we marched. And we marched, and we came to a memorial on the main square in the capital of El Salvador. And I looked at that, and the first thing I thought was, wait a minute, that's our monument. That's the Vietnam Memorial. And my Salvadoran friend said, well, we took the design, and it's got as many people's names chiseled onto that as you've got where you had Vietnam War, but these are people we lost fighting your country. Wow, a little country of 5 million people lost as many people as we lost in the Vietnam War fighting us. Maybe they were communists and we had to kill them. I'm not saying it was wrong, but I'm just saying this is baggage. And this is reality. And to see that, and to see people visiting the name of their father, and to know my taxpayer dollar paid for that, there's a responsibility that comes with that. And maybe as a taxpayer, the typical American good person doesn't take personal responsibility for that kind of stuff. But because I've traveled, I know that every bomb that drops and every bullet that flies from my country has my name on it because I'm a taxpayer. It's got your name on it too. And, you know, sometimes we have to drop those bombs, but there's a responsibility to know what's going on. And you don't know what's going on when you stay at home and you look at the news every evening. When you travel, you can learn what's going on. Just a couple years ago, I made a show on hunger and how hopeful it is now with modern development aid. And it's one of the richest experiences I've had from being on the road as a pilgrim, learning what is the structure of hunger in a world with so much wealth. I hear so many people talking about women's rights, ignoring the fact that for the average lot for women on this planet is to abandon their families and walk half their waking hours for water and for firewood. There's an issue. And that issue could be addressed. To me, that is the overriding economic justice issue. And thank God we're realizing that if we empower women in the developing world by educating them and supporting them, they can rise above that dehumanizing chore of being pack horses for water and firewood. It's appalling when you go down there and you see the reality. And when you see what extreme poverty is. I don't enjoy seeing that. But we have such a tender society these days that we can't complicate our lives by seeing the reality. And the reality is the flip side of that cheap banana because of American trade policies. And that's not because I'm liberal. That's because I've traveled and I've seen the human result of our aggressive approach to economics on this planet. And I've also seen what love can do. I've also seen what U.S. aid can do. I've also seen what modern development aid can do. Many people write it off because it's corrupt, or they write it off because it makes people dependent. Old-fashioned aid made people dependent. New aid makes people independent. It's amazing when you learn about it, what it's doing. And when I see that our country spends $1 trillion a year on hard power, I know we need a military, but I think our Defense Department is designed to make us safer. It's to defend us. And we should do an analysis of what will make us safer. A little less hard power and a little more soft power? Arguably, it might make us safer. But I don't know who's going to talk that up, you know. But you could think about it when you travel, the value of teaching these women the importance of nourishing their kids for the first 1,000 days, of educating young people, of helping them with seeds that will weather climate change. You can see the success, the bright eyes of a child who's had good nourishment and education. You can see in the confidence of women who have been given a bank account and firm title to land. These are the rudiments of dignity, and that's development aid in 2023. And I just was meeting with some people from USAID yesterday. I'm working with Bread for the World, and I'm just one little businessman. But all of us, when we think about wild hope, can recognize that we can be a force for good on this planet. And that should be integral, I would think, to wild hope. And I don't have time to get into all of the simple little low-hanging fruits of development aid, but if you give a woman a stove instead of an open fire, there's a whole book full of advantages her family has, not to mention deforesting the land by 75% because it uses the wood more smartly. So that's just what I've learned because I've been curious on the road, and I'm really thankful for it. And I've learned in my travels that even if you're motivated only by greed, if that's all you care about, if you know what's good for you and your kids, you don't want to be filthy rich in a desperately poor world. It's just a lousy place to leave your grandkids. And even if you can, afford an armed guard so your kids can go to the park. We don't have that here yet because our gap between rich and poor isn't quite there, but go south of the border. Go to Guatemala, go to Mexico, go to Colombia. Every hotel, every bank, every pharmacy, armed guards. Why? Gap between rich and poor. How do you solve that? I don't know, but there's a way. There's got to be a way. Even if you can barricade yourself behind designer fortifications, that's no future to live in. And when you travel, you look into the eyes of these girls, these little kids, and you realize, yes, they are children of God. They're just as precious as our little kids. And then you remember that for the cost of one set of braces on our kids, you can drill a well for a thirsty community. I spent $5,000 to give my little girl straight teeth. Yes, it's not a guilt trip. I work hard. We have a winning system. Our kids get straight teeth and money left over for whitener. But for the cost of one set of braces, you could drill a well and give that whole thirsty community water, and all those moms could stay home and care for their kids. Now, if you have that enlightened approach to we're all children of God, you see the wisdom of that kind of practical investment. For the cost of one extra soldier overseas, you could drill 100 wells in 100 thirsty communities. And every morning, all the moms in that town, instead of walking across the county to get their water, they walk across the square. And when they pump that well, what are they going to think? God bless America. This is soft power. It's a very interesting idea. It complicates your life. And when we travel, we think about that when we travel with the road as church. I think the most impactful experience I ever had was on my very first trip. I was in Oslo, 1969. I was 14 years old. My mom and dad were compromising their only first trip to Europe greatly by taking their little boy along. We were at the park behind the palace, Frogner Park, Gustav Vigeland statues. And I'll never forget looking up at my mom and dad as a little 14-year-old twerp and thinking, God, they could be having a great time if they didn't have me right now. They were loving me like crazy. And I looked around that park, and it was speckled like a Monet painting with other parents loving their kids. And it occurred to me, wow, this world is home to billions of equally precious little children of God. That was a beautiful, beautiful moment that this little ego and ethnocentric kid learned on the road. And it just sort of kicked me off into a lifetime of this kind of stuff. Now, this is my 4-month-old grandson, Atlas. His name is Atlas. It's a good name. And my commitment to this kind of message is greater than ever because now I've had a grandchild in my arms. And I've also been able to see the joy that my lovely daughter has by having a healthy, privileged, beautiful, lovely child. And as a proud grandpa, I'm even more committed to this father and child. A nameless father and child in who knows where, because their lot in life is just as important and beautiful as my daughter's and baby Atlas. That's a consequence of being on the road. I'll just finish with this idea about a dervish, because as a tour guide, I love to take something that's kind of freaky and make it less freaky and more meaningful. I was in Turkey, and I wanted to meet a dervish and learn about why do they whirl. You know the whirling dervishes. It's kind of like cruise ship entertainment. I found this guy, and I said, can you tell me what you're doing? Can I watch you whirl? And he said, you can watch me whirl, but I'm not a photo app. I want to explain to you what I'm doing, So he said, I plant one foot in my hometown, in my family, and the other foot goes around and celebrates the diversity in God's great creation. I put one hand up to accept the love of our Maker in heaven, and the other hand, like the spout on a tea kettle, goes down and showers creation with his love. He said, I'm a dervish. You're probably a Christian, and you'd think of me as a monk, but I'm a dervish is like a Muslim monk, and I'm into the prophet Mevlana. I think you call him Rumi. He's kind of like the St. Francis among Christians, the prophet of love. Easy to get your brain around that. And 5 times a day, I whirl myself in a meditative trance, and I think, how can I be a conduit of God's love? And I just have often thought, wouldn't it be fun as a Christian to be able to whirl? And you could plant your foot in your hometown with your family and all your loved ones. And the other foot could go around and celebrate and remind us of the diversity in God's great creation. And one hand could go up and accept the love of our Maker, and the other hand could go down, and we could all contemplate, meditate, aspire to be a conduit of God's love. And we could make the world a better place, and we could come home with what I think is that most beautiful souvenir. And understanding that the world is filled with love, it's filled with beautiful people, it's filled with joy, and it's really important for us to get out there and get to know the family. I hope that gives Wild Hope another dimension, and it's been a delight to be able to share that with you tonight. We're going to have a reception downstairs, I understand, if you'd like to hang out there. Samuel's going to be selling these books for a gift of $20 or more to Wild Hope. Just make the check out to PLU or give him a $20 bill. I don't think there's going to be credit cards, but checks or cash is fine. And I'll wish you thoughtful and happy travels. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.